Hey, before we get into today's episode, I want to talk about ChevyDriveChicago.com. Chevy Drive Chicago has everything you need to shop and buy smart at your local Chevy dealer. Great styles, the latest tech, you'll look good, and you will feel good about what you're driving. Now is the time to get into the Chevy family of EVs, Equinox EV, Blazer EV, and Silverado EV. You can take advantage of all incentives today. Don't wait. Go to ChevyDriveChicago.com to find your local dealer and drive one today. Let me tell you that Blazer EV, PFT's got one, and it's really nice. I really enjoy just seeing them cruise down the street. I've hopped in it once, and I was very impressed with all the technology in it, how it drives. Obviously, you guys know I'm on record as thinking EVs drive better. I highly recommend checking those out. Just test drive one. It's that simple. See if you like it. If you don't, go back to gas or get a different Chevy. You can head to ChevyDriveChicago.com today to find your local dealer. Go check it out. Also, I want to talk about Barstool Golf Time Supreme, the golf season. This golf season, are you looking for an easier way to get on the course? We've got you covered because the Barstool Golf Time app makes it easy for golfers to find the best tee times at the best prices. Stop searching all over Google for your next tee time or going through the hassle of calling courses. You can search multiple courses in your area from one app and get your tee time set within seconds. With every action you take in the app, you earn a reward point, and it can be redeemed for merch in the Barstool store. We just relaunched the rewards experience in the app. There's more items from the Barstool store to choose from, and you now have more flexibility with your points. You can use reward points as credit to any item in the collection, or you can bundle and use points on multiple items. Come golf with us. Download the Barstool Golf Time app today. All right, bang. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Today we are joined on Zoom by Larry Schnapf. Larry, excuse me. I had a long night yesterday, Larry. I apologize. New York lawyer who has sued the government to have the JFK files released. Larry, thanks for joining us. I just want you to know that this is my friend Chief's Super Bowl. He loves talking JFK more than anything. So
okay, great.
I'm excited to hear you guys kind of really get after this.
Eddie's going to be leaving the room now.
Yeah, so I basically can. Yeah. But what's up, Larry? How are you?
I'm okay. It's been crazy. Representative Luna, who is the chair of the the task force on declassification of federal secrets, has been very active. And she's been pushing the agencies to get documents released. So every week there's something new, and she's a real fireball. I mean, I wish the Earl Warren had her enthusiasm for the truth, because she just, my co-host on JFK Facts, Jeff Morley, I mean, he'll be in her office and he'll say, "We want this record," and she calls up somebody and says, "I want this record."
How effective is that? Because now we're in year 60 plus, 63 years. Yeah.
So she's actually so it's been a struggle. I mean, there's never going to be a smoking gun saying, "Here's how we're going to kill the president." But there's a lot of documents coming out that are giving us a nice mosaic, filling in a lot of blanks, because it's the very reason the CIA, for all these years, has been holding back records, and some records that on their face are innocuous. And they use what they call the mosaic theory, which is that even a document that looks innocent could give our adversaries more of a picture, a bigger picture, like a jigsaw puzzle. And so they want to keep all these documents classified. But by the same token, as these documents come out, they give us a little more information. I mean, sometimes they classify records for stupid reasons. So there was a document that was released, I think in 21 or 17. So I forgot one of the record dumps. And there was nothing in the record that we did not already know. It was about Oswald in Japan. But the reason it was being classified was because the information was collected by our CIA listening station in Australia. And apparently back in the 1960s, early 60s, we had promised the Australian government that if they allowed us to put a listening station on their soil, that we would never reveal its existence. So the CIA is objecting to releasing this information, even in the 2010s, when the number one TV show in Australia was Pine Gap, which is about our CIA station in Australia.
So
So some of this stuff is stupid stuff.
yeah, so let's get into what grounds you're actually suing the government on. So like how are you, like the minutia of like how are you able to bring this case under what laws and statutes? Like how did you come up with this specific idea?
Okay, so taking a step back, the when the Warren Commission investigated the assassination, when they finished their work, their records were classified, and there were also FBI records that were considered law enforcement records that are exempt under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. So then the House Select Assassinations Committee did its own investigation, and as when it was finished, its records were basically um, sealed for 50 years till 2029. So then Oliver Stone's movie comes out in 1991, and at the end of his movie, he has this trailer saying that there are 5 million records, that are being withheld, and that caused a firestorm. And so Congress unanimously passed the JFK Records Act, which required agencies to scour their records for assassination records and then transmit them to the National Archives. And then the statute also established Assassination Records Review Board that would review the files. And if the agencies still wanted them to be classified, the review board would review those records, and there were statutory criteria for when the records could be withheld. There had to be an imminent, there had to be, so there's a strong presumption for public disclosure. And the only way a record could be withheld would be if there was the identifiable harm to national security was of such significance that it outweighed the strong public interest. And so the the review board, released lots of records, but there were many records that remained classified. And they were supposed to be released on October 24th, 2017. In addition, the review board lasted for 4 years. They didn't stop working because they finished their job. Congress stopped funding them, but there were still outstanding records that they were seeking when they went out of business. And so the National Archives was supposed to, they entered into a memorandum of agreement with the CIA and the review board the day before the review board went out of business, where they would continue to pursue the CIA's compliance with these outstanding records. So nothing happens basically from September 30th, 1998 till 2017. I mean, there's a few records that are dropped, but really not many.
Yeah.
And there's no follow-up on this memorandum of agreement. In fact, the general counsel, or one of the senior lawyers at the CIA, issues a memo in 1999, lessons learned from the JFK Act, because the JFK Act superseded all the other statutes. So in other words, Freedom of Information Act, any record that, because the way the national security orders that are signed by the president and the Freedom of Information Act was being implemented, it was preventing the full disclosure of records. So the JFK Act superseded all these other statutes. So then President Trump comes into office, and he announces 2 days before the deadline that he's going to release all the records.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the day of when the record's supposed to be released, basically a memo comes out that postpones the records for 6 months. Some records get released, but for the most part, the body of records get withheld.
And what was the reasoning for the delay?
So I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
So then at the end of the 6 month period, he then again postpones the records for 3.5 years. So he tells Judge Napolitano, uh, who's a former judge, who's now, does a lot of speaking on various conservative radios and TV.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Napolitano asked him at the end of 2020, Mr. President, why did you postpone the records? And he said, if you saw what I saw, you'd know why.
Right.
So I sent the Freedom of Information Act, I filed the Freedom of Information Act with National Archives. I wanted to see what really happened. And I didn't get any response. So then I sued them. That's lawsuit number one. And they basically immediately settled, and I got thousands of documents. And what I saw was that the National Security Council had been tasked with um, shepherding the compliance with this with the October 24, 2017 deadline. They were basically the gatekeepers. They went out to all the agencies who had records of being withheld, and the National Archives actually objected to the grounds that the FBI and the CIA were using to prevent further disclosure. And the National Archives did its best, but it doesn't have the power to overrule the agencies like the review board did.
Mm-hmm.
So the National Security Council overruled it. Um, so in 2017, they're battling about this, and so they basically got the NSC told the archivist that they had to write a letter asking for a 6 month extension. And so there's a letter in the files written by the archivist, and this letter went through 12 different iterations. And so I didn't get the actual drafts, but I got the email correspondence.
Okay.
So what was happening was Mike Pompeo, um, when he was the director of the CIA, basically told President Trump that it's too early to release these records, that there are names of informants in these records, undercover agents, that if we reveal their name, we promised we would never reveal their names. And if we reveal their names, it would make it very difficult for us to get new people to do this work for us, and it could jeopardize their families. 60 years ago, right? So President Trump doesn't know any better. He's only been in office for 10 months, and he trusts Mike Pompeo.
Yeah.
And so they postponed the records. And so while President Trump, when he went on Twitter saying we're going to release the records, he didn't know that there was this other thing going on in the deep state to postpone the records. And then Mike Pompeo walks into his office the day the record's supposed to be released. And Mr. President, you can't do this. So that's what I learned from my lawsuit number one. So then when Biden comes into office, he's supposed to release the records in 21. And we're hopeful that he was going to comply because he voted for the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so in anticipation of the deadline, I got together a bunch of historians and researchers and lawyers, and we wrote a letter to the president explaining why we believe that the grounds that were used to postpone the records by President Trump did not comply with the law. That went nowhere. I then contacted my representative, who was chair of the House Oversight Committee, who has jurisdiction over the act, and I asked her to hold a hearing on the failure of the executive branch to comply with the JFK Act. Now, unfortunately, she was a Democrat. Biden was a Democrat. She was not going to do anything to embarrass the president.
Mm-hmm.
So Biden postpones the first deadline in 21. He postpones it on the grounds of COVID. That there's no one in the government that's going to work that can review documents. So at this point, I finally get myself and another attorney, we finally find Mary Farrell Foundation is willing to now file a lawsuit. So we bring an action against President Biden on the grounds you can't. So we bring first we name President Biden and the National Archives as the defendants. The National Archives is in its role as the successor to the review board. It actually said when the review board went out of business, the National Archives took the regulations that the review board had uh, developed, basically the definition of what an assassinations record is, and they moved it to its section, to National Archives section of the Code of Regulations. And when they did that, in the document in that appears in the Federal Register, they said they were the successor
Hmm.
to the review board, and they were continuing to process records, and they were doing this to give guidance to agencies. So we brought an action. So we had counts against the National Archives for failing to comply with the Administrative Procedures Act. They had a duty, and they failed to comply with this duty. And when you delay taking action, that's considered a final agency action, which gives you grounds to sue. The president is not considered an agency under the Administrative Procedures Act, but there is a line of cases um, that precedes the Administrative Procedures Act, which was passed in 1946, that applies to the president. So we sued him for that, for saying that his executive order did not comply with the JFK Records Act.
Hmm.
So we filed that lawsuit in the Northern District of California because the California courts had been more amenable to hearing challenges to presidential actions than the DC courts. The DC courts are very respectful, at least until this administration, with actions taken by the president, particularly in the area of national security. So we thought that would be a good place to file. And we filed a lawsuit in uh, in 22, and right as we filed the lawsuit, President Biden issued an executive order postponing the records, releasing some, postponing more records. Then he issued another executive order, and finally, in June of 23, he issued a final executive order that basically said this is the final act required under the final decision required under the act. He authorized these development of these transparency plans, which is an incredible Orwellian term, because the transparency plans use criteria that are not in the statute and actually allow for postponement of some records well into the 2040s. Remember, the deadline that caused the JFK Act to be enacted in the first place was 2029.
Hmm.
And some records were never going to be released because they dealt with NATO. I don't know. Now, each one of President Biden's executive orders, by the way, were auto-signed.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if he actually signed these documents, whether he actually
Neither does he.
issued or whether the NSC just did it.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so we made a motion for injunctive relief to order the National Archives and the president to basically, we wanted the court to invalidate the transparency plans because they were not lawful. They had unlawful criteria. And we wanted also the National Archives to be ordered to complete the searches, the outstanding search requests that were outstanding since the ARB went out of business in 1998. And the court on this particular motion not only refused to issue the order, but also dismissed President Biden from the case.
Hmm.
So we're still proceeding. That was a motion. We're about to go into discovery. And then of course, then Trump 2.0 happens, and President Trump issues an executive order requiring all records in the possession of the federal government to be released. So it's not just records And people get this confused. There are records that are being held by the National Archives in the JFK records collection. That's one category of records. And while lots of those records have been declassified, there are still records that have redactions, crossouts, blackouts,
Yep.
uh, omissions. So those records are in the collection, but there are still records that are not in the collection that should be in the collection. And 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 so Trump's order could be construed as saying, well, those records not in the collection also have to be
Yeah.
searched, put in the collection, and released. So there's two groups of records that we're trying to get now. Interestingly, the Department of Justice's litigation strategy or position hasn't changed since President Trump's executive order, which is a little bit of a disconnect. So what I've been doing, we have a status conference coming up in the court. The judge is not particularly friendly to our lawsuit. Uh, I don't think he likes it. I mean, but it is what it is. We can obviously, if we are unsuccessful, we're hoping that the actions that are being taken by Representative Luna, Tulsi Gabbard, and Pam Bondi, pursuant to the order, are going to basically make our case moot. But if not, we can always appeal to the Ninth Circuit when there's a final ruling. So I have friends, in the Trump administration. I know some lawyers in the Trump administration. I have contacts with people that know people that are senior people. So I've been using my contacts to try to get records released. And so, in fact, this morning, one of my friends is meeting with Representative Luna. I gave him a list of documents that need to be released. And I could share what I think some of the critical documents are if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, let's do that. And I also, how come there hasn't been like an equivalent church committee? And is that something that you can push? And why isn't Mike Pompeo being questioned under oath about this and a number of other things, but like specifically about this? Like, what is there a process to bring this where people have to be under oath and be questioned?
Well, there could be. I mean, so the Oversight Committee created, well, the Church Committee was in 75 and 76. The House Assassinations Committee was in 77 and 78.
Yeah.
That was an outgrowth of the Church Committee. Senator Hart and Senator Richard Schweikert from Pennsylvania had done what we call Book 5 of the Church Committee, which reviewed the performance of the intelligence agencies during the Kennedy assassination. And a result of that book, Congress created the House Assassinations Committee. But that process got hijacked. There was funding problems. Bob Tannenbaum and Richard Sprague were forced to resign.
Mm-hmm.
They were real prosecutors. The review board did a great job in the time it was there. And then just getting Congress to perform any oversight was impossible. And it wasn't until President Trump's executive order came out this January that we got some traction. So the Oversight Committee created this task force, which has the authority to investigate all the assassinations, JFK, RFK, MLK. And they added some other things like UAPs. So Representative Luna is the chair, but ironically, the Democrats are doing nothing on this panel. They've actually, the first public hearing we had, they were spending their time making political points to try to undermine President Trump and his order instead of interviewing the witnesses with meaningful questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's such a weird dynamic now. When I was younger, the Democrats were the ones that mistrusted the CIA and were interested in learning government secrets. And it was the Republicans that were defending, the deep state. It's completely flipped now. And the Democrats are the ones that are like protecting the deep state. And the Republicans are the ones that are looking for the truth. So this committee is only functioning with half its commit. The task force, basically, only Republicans are the ones that are really looking for stuff. They had two hearings so far. The first hearing was the one where Oliver Stone spoke,
Mm-hmm.
and some other researchers. The second hearing, they had some other people, Dr. Curtis, who was really important witness, and then Judge Tunheim, who was the chair of the Assassination Review Board, Dan Hardway, who was one of the attorneys that well, he wasn't an attorney then, but he was on the HSCA, the House Assassinations Committee. So they could call people under oath. She's doing a lot of right now. She's focusing. Representative Luna's focusing on getting documents. Um, I have some forensic tests. I also want her to be done, which I can talk about as well. Um, in addition to actual records, there are some tests that we could do.
What kind of tests? What kind of new information are you looking for with these tests? Let's get right
So,
to that.
um, for example, I have a friend, John Orr, who was a Department of Justice attorney in the '90s, late '90s. He discovered that there was organic tissue on the nose of the bullet fragments that were found in the limo. They had always thought those were inorganic; they were cloth.
Okay.
Turns out they were human. And so he got Janet Reno to actually determine, they tested it and they determined it was human tissue. The next step would have been to determine, well, whose tissue is it? Is it John Connolly's or is it President Kennedy's?
Mm-hmm.
And is it scalp tissue or is it neck tissue? Because,
Yeah.
right? Because that could dismantle
The magic bullet. Yeah.
So we want that work to be done. Um, when the House Assassinations Committee conducted tests on the rifle in 1978, the bullets that were fired in 1978 did not match the bullets from 1963. Now, the forensic experts said, "Oh, that's because the rifle was fired several times, and it's in not a good condition, and that's why the markings are different." Well, I've talked to several tool mark experts,
Mm-hmm.
and they have said that firing the rifle 100 times will not change the tool marks. And once you fire the rifle a couple times, all the rust would come out. So I would like to have all of the bullets and the shells in evidence be studied using modern 3D technology instead of relying on an FBI agent to use his two eyes to determine if there's a match. There's now 3D technology that can be used
Yeah.
to actually try to determine if everything matches up. Because again, we have either FBI experts or experts hired by the HSCA whose livelihood really depended on getting work from the government. So we never got objective experts to evaluate the bullet to see whether did that rifle actually fire those bullets. Another test would be, well, I have with John Orr, we have put our own money into a project where we have created the most accurate recreation of Dealey Plaza using drones, photogrammetry, and John's focus was to determine if the single bullet theory was doable. And I mean, we've even taken into account that Dealey Plaza was paved 3 times in the last 60 years. Dale Myers had done a 3D recreation, but his was a cartoon
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't he manipulated the position of the bodies, the size, relative size wasn't right. I mean, he basically he created a model that would back up the Warren
Yeah.
Commission. So we created this 3D model, and not lab. We're having a little bit of dispute with Not Laboratory right now because they were working with us and then they went rogue and they're claiming it's theirs now, and so they went out there on the internet. Anyway, we did 2 trajectories from using the Zapruder film and the 3D, what we got, and we did it at frame 225 and frame I think 196. I forget. We did the 2 extremes where a bullet could have been fired, where the 2 men were potentially in a position where a bullet can go through both.
Okay.
And we determined that if a bullet had actually passed through President Kennedy into Connolly, it would have circumcised Connolly.
Okay.
The trajectory did not match what the Warren Commission said it was. So I'd love to have Luna's task force work on that. The Warren Commission never tested, and this was interesting. In 1975, there was the unknown hearing. It's been lost to history, but it's available. Bella Abzug, who was a representative from New York, conducted a hearing, and she had David Bellin, who was one of the Warren Commission lawyers, testify that they never tried to reproduce the shooting. When they did their tests, all they wanted to know was, could a bullet go through both men? They never tried to determine,
Yeah, they were trying to prove a hypothesis as opposed to find the truth. Yeah.
Right. So those are the kind of forensic tests that we'd like to have done. Also, I know that Sirhan Sirhan, the shooting for RFK, I know the team that's trying to get Sirhan Sirhan pardoned or having his parole granted wants to have those test on those bullets done as well, because that's even wackier.
That's going to have to be a separate episode, because all those bullets are accounted for, and they all came from the front, and none of those hit RFK. So that one, let's table that for a different time. Yeah. So the premise of that movie 91, JFK, it was a lawyer who was bringing a case against a supposed CIA asset, but really it was a show trial about the assassination. Is that a route that is still possible through our legal system? Because it's like you watch these Oliver Stone things and you read these different books and you see like the famous backyard photo of Lee Harvey Oswald with the rifle, and there's some weird inconsistencies, especially when you compare it to the rifle that was walked out of the book depository in by the Dallas PD, where it's like the strap was clipped at different. It's like it's a different rifle than what was that was used as damning evidence, and I think it was on the cover of Life magazine. So is there a route where you could present all this evidence to a jury of American citizens, as opposed to going through Congress and these committees and the CIA and presidential orders? It's like, no, we're charging a person and we're going to make them stand trial. And then is there another route where we can have like almost a redo of that Jim Garrison? Is that possible? And is that something that you've considered?
Well, I mean, it is possible. I mean, so I did a mock trial in 2017 at the South Texas College of Law with Bill Simpich and Bob Tannenbaum. And by the way, there's been 7 mock trials held by law schools or bar associations since 1967. 6 of them have resulted, including the one we did, in either an acquittal or a hung jury. The only one that resulted in a conviction was the one that Vincent Bugliosi did with Jerry Spence. And Jerry Spence really wasn't ready for that show trial.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an actual proceeding in Texas called a court of inquiry, which is what, by the way, Texas wanted to do right after the assassination, and LBJ squashed that in exchange for the Warren Commission. And Bill Simpich and I actually approached Marina Oswald in 2018, and we said, there is this proceeding in a court of inquiry in Texas, and we would like to bring pro bono on the behalf of you and your daughters a proceeding to try to expunge Oswald's arrest on the grounds of lack of probable cause. And she was not interested. So we're going to have to try to figure out a way to get in touch with the daughters to see, because we said to them, I would hate for your family to end up like the Mudd family. Dr. Mudd, who, repaired John Wilkes Booth's ankle, was subsequently imprisoned as part of a conspiracy to kill President Lincoln. And they've tried to clear his name And I believe the broadcaster Roger Mudd was related to that Dr. Mudd. But I said, this is more about your descendants. I mean, they're tainted. They're going to be tainted with this, that their relative shot the president.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a case, and she wasn't interested.
Okay.
And she's been taken advantage by a lot of people over the years. So unfortunately, but there could be. I mean, a prosecute. You could have one of these innocents. Uh, the problem. Oswald was never convicted, right? He was
Yeah.
killed in police custody. So there are integrity units that re-examine convictions. So there's kind of a loophole there. He wasn't convicted. But there's nothing preventing a local, district attorney or U.S. attorney from bringing in an action, or at least having impaneling a grand jury if they want to. But no one's going to spend resources on a case that's 60 years old. The only way we get something, a real case, would be using this court of inquiry proceeding. And we had it teed up pretty good because it's a discretionary action. You have to get a judge to say yes. He's not
Mm-hmm.
obligated to respond to the petition. And we knew someone in Dallas, in the Dallas Democratic Party, that helped appoint judges. And we thought we could find a judge who was friendly to this, at least try to get us in the court. Um, and she wouldn't go for it. Now the guy that we knew has died. And we could probably still do it, but it's just very, but that is a true that's a real mechanism that could be done. New Orleans might be another.
Are
Well,
you able to bring a case like we see companies and corporations getting sued for nefarious acts all the time? Could you bring a case against the CIA, the FBI, like a genuine case? Like, we think that you did this, and there's enough evidence where you could prove a conspiracy. I think either the HSCA or the Church Committee, their ruling was that there was some level of conspiracy. So is that, can you bring the CIA to court?
um, you know, so if someone murders somebody, it's a very high standard.
Yeah.
In theory, I don't know if the CIA. I'm sure they waive their sovereign immunity on an issue like this, but to get somebody, look, these people that I'm trying to think. So the normally if it'd be an attorney general.
Mm-hmm.
These are political creatures,
Yeah.
and so half the states are automatically not going to bring an action against the CIA. And people that are in the federal government, they got there because they're friends with people, and it's very hard. And particularly now, I mean, a lot of people are afraid even of their own shadow. So you'd have to get a grand jury, and I don't know if we have enough evidence at this point. Most of the witnesses are dead. We have stuff. We have what they said on in books, and
Yeah.
sometimes we have some transcripts. But by the way, on the House Assassinations Committee, I was talking to someone the other day who was involved with the acoustic study, and he said that the shots actually lined up with the Zabruta film, but at that point in time, Blakey, who was head of the Assassinations Review Board, did not want to have the conclusion that the shot hit the president. So they wanted that shot they discovered to miss.
So
So
the
they
one that hit the guy in the underpass,
the grassy knoll area,
the grassy. Okay. Okay.
and so they wanted to preserve Oswald as the gunman. Um, so the government cannot investigate this case. It would have to be an independent. Now, by the way, if we discovered there are records destroyed, if Luna's committee discovers that records have been destroyed after they're asked for, they could appoint a special prosecutor. Congress can appoint a special prosecutor. And, records have been destroyed. The Secret Service destroyed records in 1995 after they were asked for them. There were threat assessments against the president in the fall of '63. And after the review board requested them, they were destroyed, allegedly because it was routine record destruction.
Yeah, because there are other attempts in Chicago and Tampa, or plots at least, where people were arrested. So you think they're related to that?
They could be. I mean, we don't know. They were destroyed.
Yeah. It's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating because it's like there's some there, and it's like it feels like no matter which door you try to go through, you open it up and there's a brick wall.
Yeah. So even 2 days ago, Jeff Morley, my co-host, interviewed this guy Bernard Legral, who's a Frenchman, and he was very, very well connected.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to write a book. And initially he got 5 offers to publish the book. And he announced after he wrote the book and he's ready to send it off to the publisher, all 5 publishers went silent. And he asked one of the publishers, his friend, one of the publishers, why? This is on tape. I mean, you go to JFK Facts. I think it's up now, so you can actually hear this towards the end. And they said that the 5 publishers said they were told from above not to publish the book. And who? And he said the French intelligence did not want the publishers to write a book saying that the American government may have been involved in the killing of the president because it would help Putin.
I mean, what the hell?
And that's the kind of, a lot of the people that continue to be defending the Warren Commission are what I call false patriots.
Mm-hmm.
Vincent Bugliosi wrote this around page 988 in his book, that he said, if the conspiracy theorists are right, what does it mean about America? It means no different than the Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
Institutions are no better than a third world country. This is about defending America's honor. To me, the honor would be that we are such a strong democracy.
Correct.
That now, I don't think that the upper echelon of the CIA plotted to kill the president. Those guys, they don't do those kind of things. I think it was the mid-level guys. I think Carlos Marcello paid for it. He was the mafia chief in New Orleans. I think he paid for it. The planning was done by the guys in Jamwave, the Miami group that was running the
Mongoose, Operation Mongoose. Yeah.
Camps, right? And I think they got the Cuban exiles who were being trained to kill Castro with a high-powered rifle while he was riding in a Jeep to shoot Kennedy. So I think Carlos Marcello paid for it. I don't think the mafia could not control the autopsy, right?
Right.
But I think Marcello, because he was actually on trial that week in New Orleans on the claim that he had defrauded the government when he said he was a Guatemalan citizen. And Bobby Kennedy basically had him removed from the customs office, put on a plane, and dumped in the Guatemalan jungle. And he was really going after Carlos Marcello. So he had the means, the motive, the opportunity. It's pretty clear, Jack Ruby was mobbed up. The Warren Commission tried to claim that he was some, distressed.
Yeah, he was a patriot. Yeah,
yeah.
But even then, like, isn't there? It feels like with the CIA, with all these different congressional hearings and everything, all roads kind of somewhere along the way, Jolly West pops up, and it's like Jolly West goes to visit Jack Ruby, I believe that's correct, and then he loses his mind, and Jolly West is with MK Ultra, so it's like you fry this guy's brain, so then he can't really give any statements or anything, and then the case is closed, and so that is. So you just laid out a pretty interesting that it was mid-level guys and not the Dulles angle, because that's the the ultimate spook is Alan Dulles, where but he had been fired, but then he ends up on the Warren Commission. It's like he was kind of running the whole thing.
Not only that, so to show you how corrupt the Warren Commission was, he and Jerry Ford were in it. They were taking the deposition of McCord and Helms. McCord was now McCoy.
Yeah.
McCone was now the director of the CIA, right?
Yep.
Helms was his deputy. And they are Dulles is asking questions of them about Oswald while he was in Russia and his interactions with the CIA. He's asking questions about these men, which Dulles was running the CIA then.
Right.
And so he's asking them questions about, he knew the answers. And he was basically leading them through that deposition to basically blame everything on the State Department.
Yeah.
So Dulles' job there was to protect the CIA. Clearly. I don't think Dulles plotted to kill the president. I mean, you can have political disagreements, but you don't get to that level and just casually decide you're going to assassinate the president. I mean, that the idea that you would do that.
Well, how did mid-level guys do that then?
Well, the mid-level guys are a whole different story because, they're operational guys. And so there were 3 strikes against Kennedy. One was the Bay of Pigs, right? And he, in their mind, he abandoned their guys on the beach. Then the Cuban Missile Crisis comes, and Kennedy doesn't take the opportunity to invade Cuba, which, as it turns out, would have been a disaster because the Russian officers had autonomy to fire. They had offensive nuclear weapons, in place. We didn't know about that. We thought they were defensive weapons. And when McNamara heard about that in the meeting in 1995 in Cuba, he almost fainted.
Yeah.
And the third strike 3 was this back channel going on between Kennedy and Castro in the fall of '63. It started with Lisa Howard having an interview with Castro in May of '63 when Castro off camera said to her he'd like to explore normalizing relations with the U.S. And she relayed this message to the Kennedy administration, and initially they were not interested. And then in September, she had a party at her apartment in Manhattan, and she put together this guy, Luega, who was Castro's right-hand person, and then William Atwood, who was one of our people at the UN. And basically, Luega said that Castro's happy to talk. He'll fly you guys down to Cuba. And Atwood, said, well, we can't really do this right now, but maybe we could have a plan in January to talk and maybe plan what we're going to talk about. Atwood tells Kennedy about this, and Kennedy's intrigued. And then Jean Daniel, a French reporter, is going to be going to Cuba to interview Castro. And Jean Daniel comes to see Kennedy in the Oval. And Kennedy gives him a message to give to Castro. Basically, he's acknowledging that our country did a lot of bad things to Cuba, but if Castro, was willing to give up communism, we could, there may be a path forward here to consider. Jean Daniel is meeting with Castro the day of the assassination. And he writes about this, and he says, Castro gets a phone call saying the president's been shot. He goes, how bad? Doesn't know, hangs up, gets a call 20 minutes later, president's dead, and Castro turns to Jean Daniel and says, your peace mission has just ended. So I think they knew about this back channel. That was strike 3. And so the low level, those guys were fearless. The guys up the top, they worry about different things, but the guys, the mid-level, I think they would have, they were the likely suspects.
They were the dirty tricks committee at that.
Because they also had the operational training. They knew how to run ops. They knew how to compromise the CIA. Now Hoover had a problem too, because Hoover had a pony problem. He liked to play the horses. And
Who
apparently,
doesn't?
but apparently Frank Costello, the head of the mafia in New York, used to give Hoover tips on fixed races. And so it wasn't that they had
Wow.
dirt on him that he was a cross-dresser and a gay. It was that the top law enforcement officer was betting on fixed races. And so they knew Hoover was never going to do a real investigation because that was going to reveal stuff that, I mean, the mafia was so infiltrated, not only just state and local, but in our federal government. And to Hoover's mind, he was fighting communism, but everybody was compromised, even Bobby Kennedy. I mean, if it came out that he was involved with these assassination attempts on Castro in 1964, I mean, it could have ruined his political career.
Yeah.
And he wanted to control the investigation.
Yeah.
So the lawsuit's still going on. I'm trying to get. So there is a tape. There are 100 hours of tapes. I don't know if you know about the Marcello CAMTEX sting operation.
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay. So Carlos Marcello was in Texarkana.
Texarkana.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, he was in jail there. And there was one older guy in the jail, Jack Van Langenham. And I guess he befriended Jack Van Langenham. And Jack Van Langenham approached the FBI, said, I've gotten friendly with Marcello. So they arranged to have him become a cellmate. And they put a radio in the cell that had a tape recorder in it. And they got hundreds of hours of conversations. And Jack Villangingham wrote a memo to the FBI later on because he was trying to get released early. That Carlos Marcello admitted to him that he was behind the assassination, that he knew Oswald, that he set up Jack Ruby in New Orleans, that Jack Ruby would come running back to his Churchill estates, and that David Ferry's the one that introduced Oswald to Marcello. Those tapes have never been released. We're trying to get them released. We'd have to get the court in New Orleans, the Eastern District Court in New Orleans, to unseal the tapes, because it's one thing to get it. We don't even have a transcript. But it's one thing to get a transcript, but you want to hear the way the person talks.
Yeah.
We're trying to get those tapes unsealed. And that's something Pam Bondi has to do. There's also files of Walter Sheridan. Walter Sheridan did an investigation for Bobby Kennedy. And Walter Sheridan concluded that Jack Ruby had gotten paid off, probably by Hoffa. And Walter Sheridan also then did an investigation. He was tracking Garrison for Bobby Kennedy. Garrison, by the way, completely ignored the mafia angle, and I think that there was a good reason for that. But
what a ball of yarn, man!
It's like great. every nefarious, scandalous name is all tied to this from that era. It's like, how could this is one of those things, and we got to let you go soon. Unfortunately, I could talk to you all day, but it's one of those things where it's like, how could something so significant and so wide-reaching with all these people, and we can't get any answers? It seems almost impossible. But then you look at what happened in Butler, PA. Nobody knows anything about that. And that's like in the internet era where there's cameras everywhere.
Right.
And it's like it makes me so disillusioned because it's like we can't get the truth about anything.
And that's the other thing. Like when I try to tell people, say, well, why are you so interested in this 6-year-old event? I said, because the lessons that were learned from that era are continuing today. People destroy records. No one gets punished. And people could hide things. I mean, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, you go on and on. People have not been punished for lying to the American people.
Crisis in 2008. There's plenty of questions about 9/11, and it's like and then they categorize you as this like a conspiracy theorist as like a slanderous thing to put you in a box, but it's like there's no answers and no justice for any of these things. It's just, if there are good answers, I would love to hear them. But it just,
by the way, the CIA is the one that came up with the term conspiracy.
I know that too. Yeah, that's like, they thought of everything. Got to credit to them. They're pretty smart.
Yeah, but things are starting. The cracks are starting, and the question is, Luna's task force has been extended for 6 months. So I had a friend meeting with her today, and so she's pushing for records, and I'm hoping she does some tests and interviews some more witnesses before they die. We can go on and on about other witnesses and the way they withhold the names till people are dead, so you can't talk to them.
Well, Larry, when's the next update? When maybe we'll follow up with you? Maybe we'll have you on again or something like that. When should we be looking out for? Any certain time frame that's pertinent here?
I mean, there's going to be some stuff in the next couple weeks. Luna's working on it. We don't have for the lawsuit. I think our status conference is in September. So, I mean, August is usually a slow month, but maybe we circle back in September.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, okay. Larry, thanks for doing this. Is there any place where you gather all this stuff that people can visit? Is there like a website or something, or how does it work for you?
I have I have a Schnapf.com. I have a Facebook page where I call JFK hard evidence or junk science, where I post stuff. Those are basically two places where and then JFK Facts. Every Thursday night we have a podcast.
JFK Facts.
Okay. JFK Facts with Jeff Morley. We're co-hosts every Thursday night. 100 people or so get up and we talk about things.
Awesome.
So I'll see you Thursday night.
Larry, thank you, man. We really appreciate you hopping on here with us.
Okay, and good luck to the Cubs.
Hey,
all right, thank
you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, Larry.